Thanks for joining us online. I'm Jonah Vic of Channel 2 Sports, and back with me this week, Vic Carucci of the Buffalo News. We'll break down the Bills' upset victory over the Broncos last Sunday, 26-16, and we'll take a look ahead. Another tough test against the Atlanta Falcons down in Atlanta. So let's start with a look back at Sunday's victory. The Bills came in as, 3.5-point underdogs in this one. What was the difference maker? Why were they able to pull off that 10-point win at home?
Well, I think the number one thing they did was figure out a way to move the ball through the air. Wasn't a dramatic improvement over what happened against Carolina, but almost anything would have looked dramatic compared to what they did against the Panthers. And I think that was the real key. It opened things up, and I think this was also a case where, they still struggled to run the football, but they found answers by being creative, especially with alignments that looked like they were going to run the ball, and in fact they threw from those alignments. Also having Tyrod Taylor move around in the pocket, something he's comfortable doing. Also throwing a lot of crossing routes, which is something that is very effective against a team like the Broncos that plays a lot of man-to-man coverage. So it was a combination of those coaching elements that I think helped to a great degree open things up a little bit offensively, just enough on a day when the defense once again did its job and slammed the door, I think in more ways than not, against the Bronco team that had just trampled the Cowboys, both in terms of their running game and their passing game. They didn't have any of that kind of success against the Bills.
I think it's kind of symbolic of the NFL in general. One week a team can put up 45 points on Dallas and then regress to 16 points against the Bills. The defense was great again. The Buffalo hasn't allowed more than 16 points in a game, still hasn't given up a passing touchdown. That might change this week against the Falcons, but nonetheless, every member of the secondary, an all-new secondary from last season, each member has an interception. So a lot to build on there defensively, but if we go back to the offense now, LaShawn McCoy was held in check again. Yet the Bills were able to win this game. What should Bills fans take away from this? Because, most would think optimism that, wow, Buffalo can win a game without Shady going off for 200 total yards.
I think the thing to pay attention to is that McCoy was part of a passing game that was kind of controlled and effectively used like a running game. A lot of short type passes. He caught 7 of them. Another 6 were caught by Charles Clay, the tight end, and they were the leading receivers on the day against the Broncos. So that tells you a lot. And again, these plays averaged about 6.5 yards total. But, Jonah, those would be solid run plays on an average. And I think that's really what you have to do when opponents have an answer for your run game. I still think there's frustration over the inability to get Shady McCoy going. A guy gets 9 yards one week and then, 21 or so the following week. That isn't the kind of run production, of course, that you expect from him. But I think what they will do by patiently working these underneath throws, these shorter intermediate routes to the running back, to the tight ends, sometimes to the receivers, is potentially open things up against the defense while they're trying to figure out how to make this wide stretch zone run game that they have, the wide zone scheme of blocking that players are still learning. Some are struggling with it. Shady McCoy trying to get a feel for it. While that's coming together, and that's still a matter of time. You don't have a lot of it in the NFL, but I think it's just about being persistent and still pounding at it.
The offense looked very similar to Week 1 against the Jets. The thing is, the Broncos' defense is really good. Some would argue it's the best in the NFL, and yet the Bills moved the ball against Denver the way it did against New York, which was encouraging. But that was in Orchard Park, and sometimes home field advantage can come into play. What does Tyrod Taylor and the entire Bills offense need to do to make that offense travel down south this week to Atlanta, where you got to put points on the board? Because I know the Bills defense is good, but they haven't faced an offense like the Falcons yet.
No, and I think, again, being smart about how they do things, not necessarily taking crazy chances. You got to take some risks for sure. Tyrod Taylor still known for his protection of the ball, not turning it over recklessly, and that'll be vital in a game like this. I think the real thing, though, is, and maybe this is the most massive takeaway, if you want, from this Denver game, Jonah, when it got into the late stages, And you've seen this movie time and again where the Bills get in the late stages and find a way to shoot themselves in the foot, find a way to give it away. That didn't happen against Denver, and they were getting points. Those were field goals, obviously, at the end, but they were vital because you never really allowed the Broncos any rhythm to come back on you. And I think they had them down, of course, by 2 scores, courtesy of field goals toward the end. And I think that's really what this game is about against the Falcons, is do the same thing. Don't let yourself, I mean, you want to dominate, you want to blow them out, but short of that, and the likelihood is on the road, just be smart about your chances at the end and make the most of every one of them you get.
Hang around, keep the game close, give yourself a chance to win at the end.
And don't kill yourself.
And that's what the Bills have really done to an extent through the first 3 weeks. Only 1 turnover, and it was an interception off Charles Clay's hands because the defender hit him. So that's kind of a fluky interception, and then they got 4 takeaways. That's a recipe for success. Also, they haven't been too bad in terms of turnovers. So against the Broncos this past week, it was Von Miller who made the mistake with the penalty. Usually it's a Bills player who does something silly like that. So Buffalo, on the other side of some of these calls and these turnovers that usually go against them, now they're using it to their advantage. But when you look at Atlanta's offense, you're going against a defending MVP in Matt Ryan. Julio Jones isn't 100% because of a kind of a back injury he's dealing with after the game against Detroit. But you still got Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman, Mohamed Sanu. Taylor Gabriel is stupid fast, can stretch the field. So they've got a lot of weapons in that Falcons offense. How do the Bills somehow, some way, limit them?
Well, number one, you don't give up on the run. Even though you could say, what's the cause for any reason to pursue trying to run the football against any team? Try it again, and they will, because persistence can still help you from a clock control standpoint. And again, those higher percentage throws. So you've asked me a question about defense, and I'm answering with offense because I think it's about the complement here, and it's about controlling clock. It's about playing to the strength of your team, which is your defense, giving it as much time as possible to be rested and able to run with all those receivers. Lean on those safeties again to come up big. Lean on those corners. They will be challenged again, as the Broncos did. And you might want to hope that the Falcons do what the Broncos did, which was come after the secondary right away, to the point I thought it was to their detriment. I think the best way, if you're going to try to beat the Bills, is come out running. You know, come out trying to establish a power run game. Broncos did that well against Dallas, and then reversed it because they said, Tre'Davious White's a rookie. All these 4 guys are playing together. There's no synchronization. So if Atlanta does something like that, the Bills could take advantage of it. But and then the other thing is just get as much pressure as possible on Matt Ryan. You know, count on those outside people to bring it, and more than anything, just play smart. Don't give them anything cheap.
That key sounds an awful lot similar to our keys to the game when the Bills play the Patriots.
Yes.
Because you want to keep Tom Brady off the field, same way you want to keep the Falcons off the field. You mentioned the running game. The Broncos averaged 4.8 yards a carry against the Bills on Sunday. C.J. Anderson, Jamal Charles, they had it going early and they got away from it. To throw the ball. Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman, a couple of the Falcons running backs. They're good, they're healthy, and they do offer a dynamic duo. So that's something the Bills have to hone in on early, and then still stay conservative on the back end against Julio Jones, who we know is an incredible receiver.
Deadly.
But all in all, Bills are 2-1 through 3 weeks of the season. They are a Zay Jones catch and a 2-yard touchdown away from possibly being 3-0. It's pretty incredible to think that this was supposed to be a tank, and here they are fighting for the top of the AFC East.
Jonah, it's impressive, and I don't think it's an overstatement to say that there is a lot to like about 2-1. It's a small sample size, but it's been impressive, and I've been the most impressed with the way Sean McDermott has handled things through this 2-1 start. He hasn't been perfect. He had some time management issues against Carolina, but again, I think those go away if, as you point out, maybe a better throw and a catch is made late in that game. But all in all, pushing the right buttons, keeping this team focused and prepared to play its best. And it wasn't the easiest thing to do, especially going into this Denver game. And he doesn't get all the credit for that. Credit the players, credit ownership for also getting involved with the meeting before the game and so forth. But Sean McDermott ultimately is the leader. And I think he has led this team very well so far.
And you would hope that some of the Bills got those early season jitters out in Carolina, a game that they came up short to. Now it's week 4. Now it's the Falcons in their house. This is a huge test against the defending NFC champions, at least for the Bills defense. I think if McCoy can run for maybe, 100 yards, this should be a Bills victory in theory.
Yeah.
But as we know,
the only missing ingredient.
Anything that we think is in theory, like last week, it can get turned on its head on Sunday. So Bills looking for that W in Atlanta this coming Sunday against the Falcons, but 2-1 and in pretty good position in the division. For Vic Carucci of the Buffalo News, I'm Jonah Vic of Channel 2 Sports. Thanks for joining us online.